Okay, so I want to ask the question today, how to compare different worldviews. And I love science, and in science, we have in epistemology this kind of list of criteria to be able to say when a theory is better than another. So a lot of epistemologists did work on these questions. And when I was researching this question for philosophy, I was jealous that I couldn't find such a clean list for philosophy. And why is that? Actually, the reason is so yeah, that's my goal to try to find criteria to compare philosophies or worldviews. And the reason why we can't find such a list of criteria is because philosophers disagree on this very question: what is philosophy? So it's a huge debate, and it's unique among academic disciplines. Philosophers don't agree about the definition of philosophy and the goals of philosophy. So the agenda of philosophy is a highly debated question. And I think it's a great inspiration just to say that philosophy should answer the big questions. And that's why actually I came here in Brussels, the Center Apostel. It was a great inspiration for me to tackle explicitly those big questions. So we went through the worldview questions. So this first 5 questions: what is, where does it all come from, where are we going, what is good and evil, and how should we act? I would say they are first order philosophical questions because they tell you directly how to act in the world. But there are 2 others also in the worldview book, which is what is true and what is false. We saw it's epistemology. So epistemology is not directly about gaining knowledge about the world, but it's a reflection, second order reflection about how to gain knowledge. And also the question, where do we start to answer those questions? So another way to put these questions is to put them in what I call the different dimensions of philosophy. We know that different philosophical schools have very different approaches, use very different methods, tools. So the worldview questions: what is, where does it all come from, and where are we going? Or the futurology, sorry, is really the descriptive part of worldviews, which overlaps with science today. It's mostly science that describes the world. There is a normative part, axiology, values, and the practical part, how to act in the world. So many people would even say that philosophy is not at all anymore into this first order realm, because mostly because many scientific disciplines did take over, except for the normative part. So, and in the second order, at the second order level, in my paper, I proposed actually quite provocatively to put together continental philosophy and analytical philosophy in the same bag of being critical philosophy, being able to criticize things. It's just that the 2 schools of thought would use different methods to do so. So analytic philosophy would use logic, reasoning, arguments to criticize anything, whereas postmodernism, hermeneutics, etc., will have different methods to deconstruct and also to show the socially constructed aspect of ideas. And as we mentioned, it's also very important to have the dialectical aspect, these tensions we're talking about between the different poles, the different positions. And there are philosophers who are interested into mapping these tensions. Where do people disagree? And it's very critical to do that, because often it's when you do this mapping of who disagrees with whom about what, that you see the tension and that you can aim for a synthesis, a greater synthesis that goes beyond a stupid tension or an enduring tension that has not been resolved. And so, yes, this third order, you can see it also as a integrating worldview ideal in the book of Apostel and collaborator. So where can we find criteria? To go through this, I went, for example, with the work of Popper, Habermas, or Ken Wilber even, who distinguish basically three broad categories: the objective world, the subjective world, and the intersubjective world. And so, yeah, they have a slightly different vocabulary. So Popper speaks about the objective physical material, is world one. World two is about the subjective, mental, and personal experiences. And world three is about societies, language, myths, theories, things we share. Habermas also speaks about the objective world, the subjective world, and the social world. And Ken Wilber, in the context of comparing Western philosophies with Eastern philosophies, also put it very nicely, just using the pronouns. The it, it's the objective, the I is the subjective, and the we is a social part. So what does it, so working also using research from Francis, I came up with a list of criteria. So the first category are objective criteria. The first one is scientificity. So generally with these criteria, you can read them as a worldview is better than another. When everything else is equal, it better satisfies this criteria. So scientificity, the worldview should be compatible with science. Objective consistency, the worldview exhibits internal and systemic consistency. And scope, the worldview addresses a wide range of issues and levels in breadth and depth. The subjective criteria are subjective consistency, whether the worldview fits knowledge and experiences individuals already have. Personal utility, the worldview promotes a personally rewarding life outlook. And emotionality, the worldview evokes emotions so that it's more likely to be assimilated and applied. Then finally, the intersubjective or social criteria. There is first the intersubjective consistency. The worldview reduces conflicts between individuals. Then narrativity. The worldview presents its messages in the form of stories. And collective utility. The worldview encourages a life outlook and mobilizes individuals for what is socially beneficial. So how do we test worldviews in practice? We can start actually with three worlds. And for example, we can ask how compatible are our subjective worldview with society. So is your worldview compatible with or in friction with the interests of society? Then you can look at the interaction between society and objective science. Is the society we are developing compatible with or in friction with science? And then is your worldview compatible with or in friction with the most up-to-date scientific models? So that's looking for testing the consistency between your worldview and science, basically. So how do we test the different philosophical dimensions? So let's start with the first order dimensions of philosophy. We know, at least in moral philosophy, the is out problem. Is your description of the world consistent with your values? So in moral philosophy, we have the is out fallacy, because something because nature is cruel, it's okay to be cruel, for example. But we can also ask other strong tension. So the is out is between the descriptive and the normative, but we can also ask the out act question. Do you connect your values with concrete decision making and actions? So that's the normative and the practical dimensions. And then the is act interaction, the description with combined with a practical dimension. Is your model for action efficient? So that's purely engineering efficiency. Now we go to the second order tests. So you can ask to your worldview, do you critically analyze your worldview with objective, subjective, and intersubjective criteria? So to be just critical about yourself. And the dialectical dimension, do you join issues and review all major positions on ideas related to your worldview? And finally, the third order test. First is a mixed question, or the question of interdisciplinarity, because some questions you can't solve just with one discipline. Is your worldview consistent with and working with other branches of knowledge? And then you want to aim at synthesis. So this is the first second order test. Is your second order philosophizing ultimately working for first order philosophizing or synthesis? And by this, I mean that, as we discussed, just mapping and being aware of a plurality of worldviews is not enough, because you have you end up with a non-consistent collection of theses. And also there is often the fallacy in philosophy to remain stuck in this second order dimension and just criticize a critique of a paper that has been criticized, and then we don't see the connection anymore with reality or with a broader goal of making a worldview. So I want to show you a fun application of this framework with the discussion between intelligent design and flying spaghetti monsterism. So where does it come from? So 20 years ago, the Kansas Board of Schools said, well, we should not only teach evolutionary theory at school, we should also have intelligent design in schools. And a young scientist was horrified by this, and he said, well, if you put intelligent design in school, why not put the flying spaghetti monster? And I have this new theory that the flying spaghetti monster did create the universe, so it's as valid as intelligent design. So what do you think, which one of these two will win in the comparison of worldviews? Who thinks intelligent design will win? Who thinks the flying spaghetti monster will win? Who has no idea? Okay, the answer is intelligent design wins. And why? We can see it very clearly with the criteria I showed you. It's the point of this scientist, Bob Anderson, I think was his name, is to say that intelligent design is not a scientific theory. So it fails miserably on the scientificity criterion and the objective consistency. And he constructed a theory that is as failing in these two dimensions. But as we know, intelligent design is not just an isolated theory. It connects strongly with Christian values and cultures. So it's actually rating better on all these other criteria, because you don't have any real community around the flying spaghetti monster. Although I think they did create a flying spaghetti monster church, but of course it won't get traction to have billions of adherents. So to summarize, and also to go meta, we can apply these criteria and tests in different ways. First, objectively, to try to describe different worldviews. For example, if we want to do a comparative history of philosophy, but also subjectively, you can ask yourself, how can I use the criteria and tests to improve my own worldview? You can also better understand why you don't like another philosophical theory or approach, just by thinking about, that's the next question, about the weights that you yourself are putting to the different criteria. And socially, it's also very useful to be able to compare worldviews, to conduct debates, and to clarify disagreements. So in conclusion, here I'm not speaking about building an ultimate worldview. It's not either a deterministic algorithm, but really it highlights epistemic values, criteria, and tests to improve worldviews and the dialogue between them. And you can find more details in my paper. Thank you.